Right, well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 67th Annual General Meeting of the Leicestershire and Rutland Wildlife Trust. I'm Anne Tomlinson. I'm the Chair of the Council of Trustees. Now, many of you will have been to one of these AGMs before, so I expect you'll remember how things proceed, but just to remind you, we have a set of constitutional business to go through for the first part of the meeting. And after that, we'll have a very short break, and we will then welcome our speaker for the evening, who's Professor Dave Goulson from the University of Sussex, who's going to be talking to us about his work helping to preserve biodiversity and in the insect world. I'd like to introduce you to our panel this evening, who are sitting there. You won't be able to see them, but they're there anyway. As well as myself as chair of the trust, we have Bob Bean, who is our vice chair, Peter Williams, who's our honorary secretary, and Andy Thorpe, who's our honorary treasurer. Staff attending this evening are Matt Carter, our CEO, Joe Taylor, our membership officer, who will also be masterminding the voting procedures for this evening, Roxanne Keelty, who is our communications officer, and she will also be giving some news updates throughout the course of the meeting, and Maddie Gage, who is our tech backup for this evening. Just a quick word about questions. Members were able to submit questions in advance of the meeting. At the end of this meeting, we're going to deal with the questions already submitted by the deadline, unless we've already answered the point in one of our presentations. We'll make that clear as we go through. You also have a chance during this evening to put additional questions in the Q&A function. Time pressure may mean that we won't be able to answer all of them tonight, but those we can't answer, we will put answers up on the website after the meeting. Do remember that if you want to minimize the pictures of the speakers in the right-hand corner of your screen during the slides, you can use the option at the top of the pictures to reduce them down to just one little bar. So I'd just like to ask Joe now to tell us how many attendees we have on board, and also to explain how the voting will work tonight.
Yeah, evening everybody. So at the moment we're at about 120 participants. When we come to the voting, we'll show a poll on the screen, and it will show for a minute. So if you just choose your decision, and then we'll show the results when the vote's over. And that's it. So I'm just going to share the agenda.
Right, thank you. So this is the notice of the meeting, which was sent out to you all on the back page of the annual review. So I'd like to take it as read that you have all received notice of the meeting this evening and for the agenda for tonight. So we can now move on to the first item on the agenda, which is the approval of the minutes for the 66th Annual General Meeting, which was held online on 22nd of November last year. I've not had any items mentioned to me about errors and omissions or matters arising. So I would like to move to the motion, please, which is to accept the minutes of the 66th AGM as a true record. The proposer is Linda Biddle and the seconder is Pat Lower. So Joe, I think you can launch the vote now, please. And the voting will be for 1 minute.
Okay, so while you're all voting, here is some recent news. I'm sure that you've all heard that the Rutland Osprey project has reached a historic landmark with the 250th osprey chick successfully fledging. For those that haven't seen it yet, you can read the article here. I'm just going to pop the link in the chat. This has been a phenomenal achievement, and one that has meant our Osprey Future Fund has received extra donations. The total raised so far is £10,295, which is 41% of our £25,000 goal. Brilliant news. This will help ensure the project can protect ospreys for the future. I'll pop the link in the chat for anyone wishing to add to the donation total. And for some other news from Rutland Water Reserve include, in October this year, the largest number of little grebe were spotted at Rutland Water since records began. This summer saw common lizards return to Rutland Water for the first time in over 15 years. And this month, a motor station will be officially opened on the 24th of November, which is a device for monitoring radio frequency tagged migratory birds and bats, and will be installed at the Volunteer Training Centre at Rutland Water. To keep up to date with our news, you can sign up to our e-newsletter or follow us on our social media channels.
So Jo, I'm assuming that the vote has finished, and could we now see the results, please? Thank you. So 84% accepted with a few abstaining. Thank you very much. And I shall now very quickly sign the minutes of last year's AGM. Right, we will now move on to the next item, which is the report of the council. And this is the report of the council for the year ended 31st March 2023. So whilst we report to you the membership on an annual basis, the work of the trust, like any charity, is actually on a continuum. That means that things don't have a neat start and end point that coincide with our reporting year ends. So the work we've done in the year ended, well, the year 22-23 is based on work started in the previous year and is now being carried forward into this current year, 23-24. So I'm going to be talking about 22-23, which is the subject of the formal report from the Council of Trustees. And our CEO, Matt Carter, will take us forward by telling us what's happening in this current year as well. At the beginning of the reporting year, the Trust formally adopted its new strategy, which charts our work to 2030. And this reflects the common strategy across the whole Wildlife Trust movement. Here on this slide are the three main goals of that strategy. It's where we want to get to by 2030. It's a lot of work to do, but it's so vital as both people and wildlife are facing existential threats in the two great crises of our generation: the loss of biodiversity and increased climate instability. These agreed goals aim to repair the damage that's been done and provide a sustainable future for the protection of wildlife. So it's these goals, which have a lot of detailed background and planning underneath them, which guide our work now and in the future. The report of the Council is set out in full in the annual report and accounts, which are available on our website, and there's a link on the AGM page. And of course, you've already had copies of our annual review, either online, digitally, or in the post, depending on your preferences, which gives a more potted history of the year. And I hope you've enjoyed reading it. So you'll be familiar with these graphics, which pick out highlights from the review. So I'm not going to spend time going through it all again, but rather I'd like to pull out a few specifics. So let's look at our goal of nature's recovery, because that's what I'm sure you're all particularly focused on. There are a number of facets to this. Our nature reserves are of huge importance to this goal, preserving a rich tapestry of biodiversity against a background of a sadly depleted landscape. But our work with living landscapes across the two counties will receive even more emphasis under our new strategy, as it seeks to create more room for wildlife outside our reserves and allow species to spread. For that, we need to understand where we are now. So we work at monitoring and recording species locally. We advise landowners on how they can help make their land more nature friendly. And we stand up for nature against poorly conceived national and local government policies by advocacy and campaigning. The Charnwood Forest Landscape Partnership Scheme is a really good example of how we're working with partners and other landowners to protect and restore sites across the area. Our contribution to this programme is in grassland management and species monitoring and advising landowners so that their land management can be as sympathetic to nature as possible. And our surveys are showing that the Charnwood Forest area is one of the most biodiverse places we have in the Midlands. But our nature reserves remain equally important as our work in the wider countryside. A nature reserve acts as a hub for biodiversity, a haven for species which can then move out into land that's being managed with nature in mind. Rutland Water Nature Reserve is a great example of this, as the first major wildlife report prepared for the reserve shows. I think one of the most striking features of the survey work is in demonstrating how important the area is for invertebrates. As we all know, without invertebrates, we all don't stand much chance. So I think that's something to be hopeful about, and it's really good to see our conservation work translating into scientific research. I can't talk about Rutland Water Nature Reserve without mentioning the Osprey project. Roxanne's just been noting the progress on the project this year. What a great year 22-23 has been for the birds. Total number of chicks raised over the life of the project is now 253, with 22 being fledged from 10 nests in the summer of 2022. But I think the major legacy of this project is the way that it has assisted the species to spread to other areas of the UK, south, east and west, with Rutland birds the pioneers of new colonies. This was the major aim of the project when we started it in the 90s, and it's great to see its continuing success. Let's spend a moment on advocacy, speaking up for nature. This is an increasingly important role as a wildlife charity. The Wildlife Trust movement is regarded nationally as an important source of expertise and advice. So when local or national policy takes a wrong turn, it's important that we use the weight of our reputation to put people right and advocate for a better solution. Over 22 to 23, we have spoken up on various campaigns, and in particular on the National Wildlife Trust Defend Nature campaign against the repeal of European legislation bill. Trust members played a great part in this campaign, and I'm convinced that it was the lobbying we have done at all levels that improved the result for wildlife, at least for now. We know, because they tell us so, that it's direct letters from constituents that really strike home with local MPs. So thank you to all members for the letters and postcards that you sent on this issue. And we're going to be asking you to help us take up the charge again in 2024, when we really need to ensure wildlife and biodiversity play a leading part in the general election for all political parties. Our work with people and communities has picked up momentum again this year with a full programme of events and activities. Our education work has continued its emphasis on forest schools, giving youngsters a great experience of the natural world. The People's Postcode Lottery funding now comes to an end, but we're delighted that other partners, including the Melton Mowbray Building Society, the Howard Watson Symington Memorial Charity and the Central England Cooperative Society, have provided funding to allow us to extend these activities into other parts of Leicestershire. And we've also been moving forward with our exciting new work on Next Door Nature. So Next Door Nature is a UK-wide initiative funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund. All wildlife trusts have been giving funding to use to bring people closer to nature and vice versa. We've chosen to use our part of the funding to help local communities in the city of Leicester achieve their plans for community green spaces and in improving the nature friendliness of their area. They are projects that bring various groups together, so they're helping wildlife and people too. Our team here has produced a great video to showcase one of the projects that we're involved with, the Belgrave Housing Association Community Garden. The full version of this video is available on our website, and I'd encourage you to seek it out. But I'd like to share with you now some edited highlights.
Not only our tenant members, but members of the local community here. When Fee came along from the Wildlife Trust and said, actually, how can we help? It kind of all happened at the perfect time, if you like,
So Next Door Nature became involved in Belgrave with the neighbourhood centre. The first meetings we had with me across the city to show me where we could potentially be working. There's loads and loads of little tiny patches. But little did I know that this is here. And they were already hosting some warm space meetings with their local community on a Monday afternoon. So I was able to sort of slot into some of those, introduce myself, become part of the furniture here, make myself a bit of a nuisance, and just start to sort of talk about people's connection with the environment and nature. And it transpires there's a lot of keen food growers amongst them. So I think we've got lots of plans to sort of transform it into a haven for wildlife and a little food growing hub for people. So it's very early days, but as you can see, the potential is enormous.
We are at the very start of this project here. Long-term plans include, hopefully, we're in negotiations at the moment of trying to create a food pantry in our garage space. So we're keeping our fingers crossed for that.
I'm hoping to bring in lots of partners from across the community that can support this group going forward. So we've got the police involved. I'm hoping to bring in the council, who I'm already working with on another project. I've got men in sheds involved. We have no tools at the moment. We're literally starting with nothing. They've got some surplus. They're going to send them our way. I may not see some of the planting and some of the things that this will evolve into, but my role here is to underpin it with all of that support so that it's got life. We just need a few more regular volunteers and then we're good to go.
We want you to come in. We want you to be a part of the changing nature of this space. We want you to make some of those decisions. We want you to be able to make new friends. And that's just a little part of it. You know, we want to be more part of the community here.
So Next Door Nature funding is for a set period only, and it ends in the spring of next year. We're really delighted with its success so far, and we really want to continue this work. So right now we're searching for additional funding to make sure we can continue. But if any of you out there can think of a good source of extra funding, do please let us know. Staying with the theme of people and nature, I need to give a shout out once again to our amazing band of volunteers who help the Trust in so many ways. And they give so much of their time. Just look, figures here on this slide. Volunteers help with their expertise and their effort, and that help also saves the Trust money that can then be used in other ways. So we're really, really grateful for all that. But I think every volunteer would say that they all get a big kick out of their volunteering work. Working in nature and volunteering generally is proven to be of huge benefit for our own health and well-being. So if you've never given volunteering a try, then do give us a call. Our volunteer family is a great one to be in. And when it comes to thanks, once again, I have to extend our heartfelt gratitude to you, the membership. We say it every year, it's always true. We really couldn't manage without your support. And there are so many of you now. At the moment, we're over 19,000 members, which is way up on the 18,400 at the end of year 22-23. You support us in so many ways, through campaigning and spreading the word, through your constant moral support as part of our membership base, and through the financial assistance that you provide with subscriptions, donations, and other individual giving. You're remarkably generous in giving time after time. And once again, we need to say thank you to those kind members who have now passed on, but who have left gifts in their wills. All these resources go to strengthening the Trust and ensuring that we can do even more for wildlife locally. However you choose to support us, all your help is of enormous value. So thank you once again from all of us at the Trust. We hope that you'll continue to support that we are doing, because I think we all know how crucial it is to protect our biodiversity. Now, I said right at the start that the work covered by this year's report extends across reporting periods. So as Eric Morecambe would say, it's hard to see the joy. So we want now to bring you up to date with what the Trust has been doing in the current year. And for that, I'm going to hand over to our CEO, Matt Carter.
Hi everybody, welcome. If I could just get my video going, so hopefully you can see me. I'll carry on. Joe, if you could just see if you could get the video up. Welcome everybody. I keep looking at the numbers of people we've got here. We've got about 139, which is just fantastic. I joined the trust in September last year. It was always one of my ambitions to come and work for a wildlife trust, so hugely exciting to join. And it's been a great experience, a fantastic part of the country, wonderful location, an amazing team with our supporters, our staff, our volunteers, really great. We've been doing a lot of things this year, which is sort of establishing the foundations for how we're going to deliver going forward. And when I came in, there had been a period of disruption at that point. And it was really about trying to find a clear direction that we could have around our strategy. And this led me very much to look at our structure and how we can align our structure to deliver our strategy. Specifically, I wanted to look at how we deliver our nature recovery, which is absolutely key work. And we've got targets around 30 by 30. And if you look at, and the 30 by 30 is 30% of land being managed for conservation by 2030. If you look at our reserves, what's clear is we need to work beyond just our own reserves in influencing, persuading other land managers. So that was a key area where we really wanted to put some focus. We also wanted to manage our nature reserves as effectively. We wanted to look across all our sites, make sure we were managing them efficiently, and also monitoring our delivery so we knew what successes we were having. Another key area was to grow our income. It's you know, this is the key for us being able to do more for nature. And focus around income streams to make sure we got bids and corporate sponsorship and grants and seeing where we could find more to be able to do more for nature. And then of course we can't work without our members, our local groups and our volunteers. So we wanted to make sure there was a really strong focus around supporting our supporters. And as I've mentioned, engagement activities are key, and you've seen the sort of thing here happening in Next Door Nature and the education projects that we're doing. So again, making sure that our structure reflected the importance of that work. And advocacy, as Anna sort of mentioned, is really important in the sense that we want to persuade decision makers, other members of the public, how important nature is, so that we can gain that support and deliver across the board. We have also put in there, we needed to update some of our other policies and processes. And that was really just about being a modern and a professional organisation. So what have we done in terms of progress? Well, we've completed that restructure this year. So we consulted around the approach and the implications with both staff and externally. And once we'd agreed the approach we wanted, we then started to populate our structures. And that did involve some recruitment. We didn't make any redundancies, although we did take a number of vacant posts out of our structure. Once we'd identified people, all our staff got new contracts, new job descriptions, and we kind of embedded the structure that we had. So now, as I put on this slide, I can share with you our management team, and you can see that the key roles that we have. And this is just great to have this in place. We've got a really skilled, enthusiastic management team there supporting what we're doing, which really bodes well going forward. I also wanted to mention, and not just because she has access to my slides, but we recruited a new comms and marketing officer. And the proposal here was to upgrade that role so that we could put more communications out and we could be more in that advocacy position where we're starting to influence and persuade people. And Roxanne is working really hard at the moment and doing a great job to ensure that there's better messaging and the trust is getting an enhanced profile wherever we are. So what else have we done? Andy, our treasurer, will cover some of the budget, but what we did do last year is we managed to establish a balanced budget for this year. to make sure it was affordable and make sure that we could deliver in the areas we wanted to. Following the restructure, we then put in new training and development for our staff. And this was both along the lines of mandatory skills that they needed to have, but also skills training around expertise and knowledge. We then put in place a number of measures to start supporting our volunteers and local groups. We produced our staff, our volunteer handbook, and we meet regularly now with our local groups to see how we can support them and help them in what they do for us. I talked about improving some of our management systems, and there were some areas which we felt we really wanted to get to grips with to establish ourselves. So we've been updating our health and safety approaches, and we brought in an external contractor to help us do that. Again, we looked at our HR policies. We knew we had to review our policies and set up a better system so we could manage them. We wanted to improve our approach to activities such as safeguarding, where there's a lot of emphasis on how we deliver that now. We developed our asset management approach. So last year we surveyed all of our assets and we developed a management program so we could ensure we could keep them in good condition. And then we've been improving our background systems like our IT and those systems to make sure we can be as efficient as possible. We've then gone on and we've increased our communication. So hopefully you're seeing more communications going out, targeted in a much better way, and hopefully you'll see just how well we're starting to influence and persuade and put that nature message out. We also started reconnecting with partners where some of those relationships had slipped, and those with local authorities, Natural England, Environment Agency, the National Forest, the water companies, all of those partners and important people within our area who can help us deliver that nature message. And that's been really positive. I mean, I've been going out talking to these and I've had nothing but positive feedback about the trust and the desire of these organisations to work with us, which has been inspiring and wonderful. And then we launched the Next Door Nature, and you've just seen the film. It's an inspiring project, which really is delivering. When we launched that, we weren't quite sure where it was going to go, and it was a little bit of a leap of faith to see what was going to happen when we launched it. But actually, you can look back at it now and see those individuals and those communities who we've engaged with, who we haven't engaged with before. So it's an inspiring project. And then delivering around a range of partnerships, such as the Charnwood Partnership and the project where we've contributed and worked with partners to improve, in that case, some grassland habitats, better monitoring, and better surveying technique. So lots of work all going on. So what's happening now? I feel we did a lot of structural things last year, sort of behind the scenes, but that's been really valuable because that's enabled us now to be in a position where we can really focus on delivering for nature and nature recovery. And we are starting now, one of the things we're doing is starting to build our reserve network. We're looking at areas around our reserves, how we can join them up, how we can establish ourselves in new areas. We had a question in which I wanted to cover here, which came from Mary, and thank you for this, but talked about can you get any reserves around the Market Harbour area? I am delighted to be able to tell you that we are getting a reserve around that area. We are just at the stage at the moment where we're going through the due process. So somebody has come forward and offered to give us a significant parcel of really interesting land. We need to do the due diligence, make sure we know exactly about the site, and I'm hoping we'll be able to announce it with the boundaries and exactly what's there in the next month or so. But this will be around Market Harbour, an area we haven't had reserves in the past. And it'll be a site which we will connect. We've already talked to the local group in Great Bowden and explained that we've got this site coming and asked for their support in both managing it and also in talking to us about what they want out of that site and how it can serve their community and the needs that they have around nature. So that's going to be really exciting. So Mary, thank you for the question. I'm really pleased to be able to tell you that we are getting a site there, which will be great. We've also expanded our site at Syston Lakes. We've been working with David Wilson Holmes, who owned another part of the lake, which we had one of our reserves on, and we will be taking on that part of the other part of the lake as well. We will also be publicising that widely soon, and great thanks to David Wilson Holmes for helping us do that and help us funding that. We've also been talking with individuals around new sites. So we have sites, and again, I can't give precise details, but we will get to a point where we can announce all of these, but we will have new sites in both Ketton and in South Leicestershire, and both of these help to build upon our sort of network of reserves. We did try to acquire quite a large area of land in Cossington, which enhance our Cossington reserve and give us sort of a bigger area. Unfortunately, we weren't able to secure the funding quickly enough. But what it's done is given us a really good experience of where that funding exists. So we're always on the lookout. We need to be careful about the affordability of taking new sites, but we're always looking at what that potential is. And then we've got some other initiatives that we're sort of leading all around nature recovery at the moment. So the County Council is leading what's called the Local Nature Recovery Strategy. And they produce a statutory document, and that sort of defines where nature recovery can take place across Leicestershire and Rutland. We're fully engaged in that process, and I think that's going to be really important for driving future nature conservation enhancements. So our nature recovery team have absolutely got involved in that, and we're a key partner in that work. We've also undertaken a feasibility study around a reef catchment, and that's throwing up opportunities for further enhancements across the catchment. We're undertaking a water vole project. Again, these were put in place last year and are now coming to fruition now. And then we've got some major bids in that we're hoping are going to be successful. So we've got 2 big bids into the Species Survival Fund, one around rivers and one in partnership with the County Council, and another that we're leading on around woodlands and dormice. So we hope these will come off, but the fact that we've put these bids in and developed them, that gives us the opportunity to hopefully do some really exciting work in the future. We did look, as Anne said, our next door nature project funding runs out next year. We did put a bid in to try to extend that, but unfortunately we've heard that we were unsuccessful. So we're now exploring other opportunities and how we can fund that going forward. So my sense is that last year we did do quite a lot of setting ourselves up and setting the foundations, but now I'm feeling really positive that we're in a position where we can really start to grow our conservation delivery, and you'll really see that nature recovery initiative starting to come through. I'm sorry I've not been able to bring up the video during that, but I really appreciate all the support and help of everybody, and thank you for coming to our AGM. I'll hand back to Anne.
Thank you, Matt. And I hope that whistle stop tour through not just the previous year, but the year we're currently in, shows you that the Trust is in a good place to be delivering on our ambitious 2030 strategy for wildlife and for people too. And on that note, I would like to move to the motion to approve the annual report of the Council for the year ended 31st of March 2023. The proposer of this motion is David Duckett. The seconder is Jenny Harris. The voting will be for 1 minute.
So again, while you're all just voting now, just to let you know that across all of our other reserves, the main concentration for us here has been our Wild About Our Reserves appeal. This has been set up to help improve our reserves. The link is in the chat for
Have we finished the voting, Jo?
Yeah, I can end it. That's fine.
Have we done the minute?
Yeah. We share the results.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So we now move to the Honorary Treasurer's report for the year ended 31st March 2023. And for this, I'm going to hand over now to Andy Thorpe, our Honorary Treasurer.
Thank you, Anne. As well as being Treasurer, I volunteer with the Habitat Work Parties once a week up at Rutland Water. so I get to see some of our wonderful wildlife, like this juvenile kingfisher caught by our bird ringers while I was on the reserve. But turning to the finances, I'm pleased to say that the financial picture for the Trust looks quite a bit better than I had to report last year. In general, most categories saw an increase in income, with unrestricted income rising by around £190,000 on the prior year. Membership income grew by over 5% in what was a really challenging year, where a reasonable number of our members dropped out due principally to the continuing cost of living issues. So to get this increase in income, we had to recruit a lot of new members to more than compensate for those leaving. In addition, donations, whether general or specific appeals, was where we saw the biggest increase in income, and most of this also comes from our members. So as usual, I give a huge thank you to all our members for the money you so generously give to the organisation, whether through regular membership fees, other donations, or when the time comes through legacies. Without this, the Trust could not do the work that we do. If you are able to give a little more, now is a very good time to do it, as we have an appeal running for our nature reserves, where for every £1 given, this will be matched by another donor. So if we could apply gift aid on your donation, that would mean, for example, a gift of £10 becomes £25, or 100 becomes £250 to the Trust. So if anyone can contribute to this appeal, it would be a very good time to do so. The largest other single source of income is from Anglian Water, to cover costs for managing the Rutland Water Nature Reserve. One area where we did unfortunately see a fall in income was in grants, but this is an area where our relatively new head of fundraising is putting a lot of effort in, and in particular, as Matt's just said, 2 very large multi-year applications have been submitted fairly recently. If one or both were successful, this will give a significant boost to our future income over a few years. On the expenditure side, the largest part is spent on our nature reserves, managing these wonderful sites for the wildlife and nature within them. In education and engagement, this covers a number of areas. Education mainly with children to inspire them for now and the future. Assisting people to make the most of visiting our Linden site and particularly highlighting our Osprey project. Coordinating the work with our many volunteers. And as you heard about earlier, projects like the Next Door Nature project in Leicester to encourage neighbourhoods in the centre of the city to get involved with nature in new and interesting ways fits into this category of expenditure. The category Champions for Wildlife covers work done on the broader landscape. This is often grant-funded work, specifically on areas other than our own nature reserves. Frequently, we'll be working in partnership with others, and this is part of our ambition to see a larger part of the land in our counties being managed for nature. In addition, we do have to spend monies on servicing and managing our membership, recruiting new members, and seeking funds from other sources. Hopefully, as we increase funding from such sources as grants, this will lead to this cost reducing as a proportion of our expenditure. In summary, in the year to March 2023, expenditure was just slightly higher than income, but at only 1% above income, this was marginal. It's a far better picture than we budgeted for in the year, and compared to the previous year where the deficit was over 10% of income. So we do believe we're moving in the right direction and that this will continue into the future. With that, I'll hand back to Anne.
Thank you very much, Andy. So we're now going to the motion, which is to accept the report of the Honorary Treasurer for the year ended 31st of March 2023. The proposer is John Mitchell and the seconder is Becky Ward. The voting will be for 1 minute.
So you might also like to know about some of our upcoming events while you're voting. The link to the events page is in the chat. We do have a couple of events to note. We have got a guided walk with Jeff on Friday the 8th of December at 9:30 at the Anglian Water Birdwatching Centre. We've got the Melton Mowbray Local Group Social Evening, which encourages you to bring your wildlife photos along. That's on Monday the 11th of December at 7:30. The local Charnwood Group, they hold a meeting once a month, and the Wildlife in Peru talk in October was fascinating. I went along and I thoroughly enjoyed it, so I'll highly recommend joining this month's meeting if you can. It's on Wednesday the 13th of December, and they are welcoming our Senior Species and Recording Officer, Tim Sexton, for a talk on the beetles top the charts, which promises to be fascinating and highly engaging. It's at 7:30 at Woodhouse Eaves Village Hall, and more details are on the page. And a couple of other events to note. We have released some more hedge laying weekend courses. We know these have been extremely popular in the past and sold out in record time. They're over at Rutland Water. So for those that are interested, get booked in quickly if you can. Plus as well, they make excellent Christmas gifts.
Thank you, Roxanne. And can we go to the vote now, please? The results of the vote now, please, Jo. Thank you very much. So we're now moving to the, what I should say, apologies, nip back a slide if you could, Jo. What I should have said, and it's a really important thing to say, is that I wanted to express my own thanks to Andy for his excellent work as our honorary treasurer over the last year, and indeed since he took up the role. Thank you very much, Andy, and thank you also to the whole finance team for jointly all your hard work over the year looking after the Trust's finances. So yes, now we can go to the next one. Thank you, Jo. So our next item is the re-election of members to council. So before we go to the actual voting on this item, I'd like to note our thanks to Matt Youngs, who leaves the council at this AGM. He's been a trustee since 2021, and he's been a great source of enthusiasm and expertise. Sadly for us, he's changed counties in order to study medicine. We're really sorry to lose him from council, and we wish him all the best. In the near future, we'll be launching a trustee recruitment programme. This is going to be advertised widely, and full details will be provided as well on the website and in the magazine for any interested members. So now I'd like to move to a vote on the motion. The motion is to re-elect 3 members to council: Anthony Biddle, Helen Knott, and me, Anne Tomlinson, have completed their 3-year term and have indicated their willingness to stand again as members of council. Details about these trustees' backgrounds and all the rest of the council are, of course, available on our website. I'd like to take the vote en bloc. So this will be for the re-election to council of Anthony Biddle, Helen Knott, and Anne Tomlinson. The vote will be for 1 minute.
Again, just while you're all voting, it is at this time of year our wildlife can struggle in the colder months. So if you do have a garden or want to help nature this season, there are plenty of ways to do so. This link I'm just putting up now into the chat goes through some of the wildlife friendly things you can do during the winter months, and includes things like how to clean and maintain your bird boxes, or leaving fallen fruit for wildlife, or creating a duvet of leaves for a perfect hiding spot for insects while they hibernate. This next link is for anyone wanting to help nature who doesn't have access to a garden but wants to help getting involved by helping wildlife. You can come and volunteer with us at any of our nature reserves. It is a great fun way to get out and about in nature, and with International Volunteer Day on December the 5th, what better way to kickstart those New Year's resolutions by being part of something amazing.
Thank you very much, Roxanne. And now could we go to the results, please? Thank you. So, right, so interesting result. 3 And we come now to our last item for a vote on the agenda. This is to reappoint PKF Smith Cooper Audit Limited as auditors of the Trust and to allow council to fix their remuneration. The proposer is Andy Thorpe and the seconder is Roy Lemon. The voting will be for 1 minute.
So with Christmas just around the corner, you may be thinking of gifts for friends and family. We are offering, as always, gift memberships for anyone who you think may enjoy becoming part of the Leicestershire and Rutland Wildlife Trust. Link is in the chat. We do have obviously individual, joint or family gift membership, and they will receive a welcome pack just in time for Christmas. We're also pleased to announce that this year we will be very shortly launching our gift vouchers for you to purchase any of your friends and family to redeem against any of our upcoming events, another excellent Christmas or birthday present. And I will just pop the events link back in the chat as well for you. Currently, the events we have available to book for the new year are the Hedge Lane weekend. We do also have the Dry Stone Walling 2-day course, which again has proved extremely popular in the past, and our botanical art courses over at Rutland Water, plus a whole range of other walks and talks will soon be available to book for the new year.
That's great, Roxanne. Thank you very much. And could we move to thank you very much, 93 and 7%. Thank you all. I meant to say earlier on, thank you all for really piling in and being very supportive of all the motions in the AGM. So we've dealt with all the voting now, and we're now moving on to the section which deals with questions from members. And as I mentioned earlier on, we did have a deadline by which people could submit their questions to be answered at the AGM. And we have a number of those already to answer. If anybody wants to put any additional questions in the Q&A, please do so. We can't promise we're going to be able to get to answer all of them tonight, but if we can't, we will certainly answer them after the meeting. So I think I'm now handing over to Matt for the first of the questions that we're dealing with. Perhaps Matt, if you could take over from me now.
Yep, thanks, Anne. So I have 3 questions that came through, which I was going to try to provide a response to, and I'll just summarise them. So these are people who sent these in beforehand. So thank you for these questions. Kathy sent in a question asking about the importance of hedgerows, highlighting how valuable they were to nature. And is there any more we could do to prevent them, you know, excessive cutting or damaging? So yeah, you're quite right. And in Leicestershire, I think hedges are really important for us. There is legislation that controls the removal of hedges, and then there is some legislation that controls when they can be cut. So you can't disturb nesting birds, for example, between March and August. And then there is quite a bit of guidance around, and people like FWAG have given very clear guidance around rotational cutting of hedges. So either one hedge and leave the other side, or splitting a hedge into 2. What is clear is that diversity of hedgerows is really important. That's what benefits species most out of all of this. And we've seen research in sites like the Allerton project, which lies just on the east edge of Leicester. They've been doing some monitoring over a number of years and have demonstrated how hedges can be really beneficial, not just for wildlife, which we know, but also for productivity in terms of farming. I think legislation is highly unlikely. I don't think we're going to see that in the near future, and I don't think it's one of the priorities from government. I think there is guidance, but I think we could certainly try to strengthen that and work with partners in farming to see how we can enhance hedgerows. It's an area that I'm really interested in, because I think when you look at Leicester, it's a very simple thing. If all our hedgerows were in really good condition, I think that would do a great deal to improve the overall biodiversity across the county. So I would be really keen next year to start us looking around what we can do to enhance hedgerows, and what guidance, support we can give to land managers to help them look after them the best possible way. So thank you for that. I think that's a really important issue. The next question we had was in relation to local councils, and thank you, this came from Jane. local councils in terms of applying biodiversity net gain, and how can we be confident that they're going to apply that. So councils will be under it'll be a statutory requirement for them to consider biodiversity net gain. And I see our role as making sure that that is applied fairly and properly. It has been delayed, and I think this is probably a reasonable delay by the government. I don't think they're trying to avoid implementing it. I think they've started to roll out biodiversity net gain and realised just how complex this is. And to be fair, it is a complex subject. And as you look at the way they're trying to implement it, you recognise that it's not as simple, and always it flushes out lots of issues. So I think this is to get the system right. So a slight delay. I think what we will then do is support local authorities where we can. I mean, we are a charity, so we're not there to do the work of a statutory organisation that's funded to do that. But we would certainly try to help. We would certainly lend our support and give our guidance where possible. And we do have some expertise around this. And similarly, we have a number of developers who are coming to us and saying, what does it mean? And we try to support them through that process as well. But at the moment, the local authorities I've spoken to are well aware of this and already are understanding what they need to do. But as I say, it's not simple. The second question was about how we can support local councils with their own land. And always, anybody who comes to us saying we want to enhance our land for nature, we're very keen to try to help, but we have to be astutely aware of there are costs associated with that, and our funding, as you've heard, is tight. So we're not a consultancy service at the moment. I'd like us to develop that further, but we need to know that, you know, there's a profitable market there. But at the moment, we can direct people to consultants that we use and third parties who are very specialised in this, and do whatever we can to help them. So we're often a good first step shop. If a local authority doesn't know what to do, come to us and we can sort of point in the right direction. But what we can't do is sort of free surveys. We need to charge for that, otherwise we just don't have the capacity and the resource to be able to do that. But a really good question, and something that we have had quite a few contacts. And the final question I had was around, and thank you to Hazel for this, was asking about our conservation committee and what they do and what their role is and what reports they produce. So if you're not aware, we have a conservation committee. It's an advisory committee to our council, so it's not in effect a public committee. Council will often be presented if there's a change in policy, it may be a new site. They'll often ask for the advice of the Conservation Committee, made up by a number of experts from across the county. And there is, having been to these meetings, there is great expertise out there. And these people will advise their thoughts. And it may be, as I say, recently over the last 6 months, we've gone to them with whether it's a new reserve we're considering taking on, or a policy we're looking at amending, or approach that we're developing. They will provide advice which then goes back to our council, and council make the decisions around those. So if we were requiring a new site, it would be council who would finally advise whether that was something we were going to pursue. But that technical advice around nature conservation is really helpful. And having members on those are really helpful who understand what's going on. We are doing a governance review, so we're looking at doing a governance review of our committees next year, and that will help us to define the role of those groups, what sort of things we'll be asking and what skills we require on those groups. So what I would say is hang on, let us go through that review, and then we will come out with the proposed structure we like and where we feel we may have some knowledge gaps or we would benefit from more expertise. And I'd really appreciate people coming forward and giving that sort of additional support to us. Fine, and I think, Anne, you had one question as well. But
yes. I've got a question that we received from Stephen King, who asked, do online AGMs discriminate against members that cannot afford or do not wish to be online? In addition, do online AGMs contribute to the increasing lack of social skills and alienation of society due to the phasing out of face-to-face meetings and events? Are the cost savings to LRWT false economies? Thank you for that question. It's a really interesting one. The thing I'd like to clear up right away is that it absolutely isn't a cost issue. We have never been doing online meetings because it is in any way predicated on us saving costs. It's always actually been about the access. We can actually run a counter argument to Stephen's proposition in saying that actually face-to-face meetings sometimes discriminate against people who can't get to an evening meeting for all sorts of reasons. Maybe they've got a young family that they're running around feeding at tea time. Maybe they come home late from work. Maybe, don't blame them, then really don't like going out on a wet, dark November evening and driving to a location quite a few miles away. So actually, just having a face-to-face meeting can discriminate against those people too. But as I say, it's never been about cost savings. It's actually always about access, because the online approach obviously started with COVID, when we couldn't have face-to-face meetings. And what we discovered, and I'm sure a lot of other charities found this as well, is that in fact we got a lot more attendees at our AGMs by using online. And indeed, tonight there's another good example. We used to get some pretty good numbers when we held our AGMs in person, latterly at OB Methodist Church, but they were round about the 80 to 90 level, if I remember rightly. We're, way over 100 and currently 144 participants. So we're picking up a lot of people who may have been discouraged by the fact that it's, being held on a wet November evening. However, I have a lot of sympathy with the direction of the questioning, because I actually think that we do need to be moving back to a position where we can have more face-to-face meetings. But I don't want to eliminate the online side of it, because I think it would be ideal, most ideal, if we could have a format which will allow people to participate in the way they want to participate, whether that's in person or online. And we're actually currently thinking about how we can change the format of the next AGM, which will probably be hybrid and may actually be a different animal altogether. So watch this space, and thank you, Stephen, for that question. Now, we've had a couple of questions in the chat. Matt, are you happy to pick up on those again?
Yes, we've had two more in, and thank you for sending those in. So the first question we had in from Patrick was talking about local nature recovery strategies. I know I mentioned that, but I'll give a bit more detail, and also reflecting that you've seen Staffordshire Wildlife Trust, for example, mapping their county and getting involved in it. So where we are in Leicestershire and Rutland at the moment, Leicester County Council are taking the lead. They have received funding from central government to lead on the development of the local nature recovery strategy. And we met with them very early on this. We also have mapped out opportunities across both of the counties. In fact, we've probably been doing this for about 50 years in terms of where the important habitats are and looking at how they can be joined up. And that was back in our sort of landscape scale work that we did considerably prior to my time. But Leicester County have been very good, to be fair. They've come to us and they engaged with us very early, talked about how they were approaching it. They have appointed a project officer who we've met, and we're working very closely with them. And I'm very confident. I believe they're intending to develop a draft strategy early next year, and we will have a major input into that. We're also working with some of the other key partners. So we've met with the NFU representatives, so we can sort of build up those relationships and hopefully come to a good consensus. But these strategies, I think, will be really important. There are probably many of you who've seen other strategies come and go because there's been other forms of these in the past. The importance of this local nature recovery strategy that we're doing now is it will have a legislative basis. So it will have to be considered by decision makers when they make those decisions. It will also link to biodiversity net gain in terms of land developed in alignment with the strategies will be more value than outside of them. So it's going to be really important, these strategies. But yeah, we're absolutely part of this. I'm very confident that we'll be able to influence this in the right way to make sure we get a good outcome. And the other question I had was, very good, why are all the courses located in Rutland? Thank you for that. It's a good question. So we often use Rutland. It is our volunteer training centre and it has all the facilities. Whenever we want to put something out to do a course, we have to provide all the usual facilities, whether it's teas and coffees or toilets, you know, clean water. So it's very useful for us. So we do try to use Rutland. That's one of the purposes of having it there. But we also do quite a lot of walks and talks around our other sites. So if you look at where those are promoted, that's something we do and we'd like to do more of, because we certainly take the view the more people we can get out on our sites and enjoying them, the better it is. So yeah, often there are a number of sites at Rutland, but as I say, keep an eye out because there's lots of other things we do around our other sites as well. I think I'll probably stop there. I can see there's a couple more questions, but we will answer those online. What I don't want to do is go on too long and make sure we have enough time for our guest speaker to do his talks as well. So any we haven't answered, I'll make sure we put answers on the web and we'll pick those up later. Hope that's okay, Anne.
That's absolutely fine, Matt. Thank you very much. And I think we have managed to answer quite a few questions this evening. And I think we need to move things forward a bit now to make sure we have got sufficient time for Dave Goulson. But as Matt says, if there are any other questions that come in before the end of the AGM, not the end of the evening, but the AGM, then we will endeavour to answer them on the website. So we are now getting towards the end of the AGM, and I'd really like now to thank my wonderfully supportive fellow trustees for their hard work and dedication as members of council over the year. An equal thanks to our wonderful staff who've worked so hard and with such enthusiasm. Thanks from all of us to our amazing volunteer team. Whatever tasks you choose to do, you are vital to the Trust's work. And finally, to you, the membership, the basis for our existence as a charity. Many thanks from us, from all of us at the Trust, for your continued support. And we're going to take a few moments now to play you a video in which our staff tell you about their highlights for the year.
Hi, I'm Matt Carter, the Chief Executive. I was delighted to join the Wildlife Trust in September last year. A really busy year, lots going on, lots of exciting work. So as always, it's challenging to find some highlights, but I picked out two that I wanted to mention. The first was that last year we started our restructuring. That was really important. It's enabled us to build a structure where we can focus around our nature recovery work, looking after our nature reserves and developing our fundraising activities. Really important things going forward. The second was our Next Door Nature project. This was a real leap of faith, I think. We didn't know exactly what was going to come out of it. It was new, it was a different way of working, but actually it's enabled us to engage with individuals and communities who we haven't worked with before. And really exciting to see the project grow and see how it's developing. So thank you for all your support, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the highlights that you're going to hear about now.
Hello, my name is Joe Davis, Head of Nature Reserve Management for the Leicestershire and Rutland Wildlife Trust. Highlight for me in the last 12 months has been getting to know our amazing reserves across the two counties. The sheer diversity of habitats and species has been great to see. And this is all because of the hard work that staff, volunteers, and of course support from our membership is made possible. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tim Sexton, the Senior Species Recording Officer here at Rutland Water Nature Reserve. The highlight for me this year has been getting out with the volunteers once a month to do the wetland bird surveys. We've had some fantastic counts this year, including our highest count of teal since records began 45 years ago. Over 2,600 individuals were counted. We've also had one of our highest counts of shovelers since records began, and that's what makes Rutland such a special place.
Morning, everybody from Bloody Oaks Nature Reserve. My name's Sarah Bedford. I am Senior Reserve Officer for the East for Leicestershire and Rutland Wildlife Trust. This is one of the 14 reserves that myself and Juliette Colasso-Fournier take care of on behalf of the Trust. We're here today to do some scrub removal and grassland management. You can probably hear a volunteer behind me at the moment tackling some bramble with brush cutter. So yeah, that's happening right here, right now, as I speak. Bloody Oaks is probably one of my highlights in the last year, simply because it's small but perfectly formed. It's only a hectare in size and tucked away alongside the A1, but a real gem in terms of its wildflower array and its pollinator number of pollinators that we get here. It featured in the ITV news segment called Hidden Gems earlier in the year, and really directed people towards those unknown spots of nature and wildlife in our counties. And I can fully recommend a visit here if you haven't been already. Other highlights may include increasing the flock of sheep at Ketton Quarry. We now have 29 sheep there who are grazing the quarry grasslands. And just in general, being out and about on all of those reserves, working with our volunteers and colleagues at the Trust to really improve the spaces for nature to the best of our abilities. So thank you for listening and enjoy the rest of the AGM.
Hi there, my name's Jo Taylor. I'm the Supported Development Manager here at the Trust. My highlight of last year was seeing our memberships increase to over 18,500 members, which is incredible. It's been a pleasure working with all the volunteers and the partners and the staff here at the Trust. And I want to thank everyone for all their support. Without your help, we wouldn't be able to do the vital work that we do to help wildlife and conservation. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Julie. I'm a membership assistant. My highlight is meeting all the lovely members at the membership event.
Hello, I'm Jo Brailsford-Finnis, Head of Fundraising at Leicestershire and Wildlife Trust. My highlight of this year really does have to be launching our first big Match Giving fundraising campaign early this autumn and seeing what an incredible response we've had already. It really does show how much the work that we do as a trust means to all of our members and all of our supporters. And I really look forward to seeing what we can accomplish in the months to come.
Hello, I'm Chris Hill, Reserves Officer at Leicestershire and Rutland Wildlife Trust. My highlight would be the possibility of breeding bitterns at Cossington Meadows Nature Reserve.
Hello, my name is Roxanne Kilty. I am the Media and Marketing Communications Officer at Leicestershire and Rutland Wildlife Trust. I joined very recently. I've only been here a couple of months, but I'm very much enjoying my time. It's been fantastic getting to know everybody and all of the amazing projects that have been going on around the whole of Leicestershire and within Rutland. My highlight has definitely been meeting all of the inspiring people that work here within the Trust, the volunteers, members. It's been a fantastic few months and I'm looking forward to my future here within Wildlife Trust.
My name is Ben Devine and I'm the Trust's Head of Nature Recovery. My highlight this year has been seeing how many amazing partnership projects the Trust is currently involved with, working with partners from across the region of all different sizes and types, some excellent projects, and we're very, very grateful for all the work that's happened with them to date. And we're really looking forward to working with them and others in the future to achieve shared and common goals around nature recovery for the benefit of people and wildlife.
Hi, my name's Maddie. I work for Leicestershire and Rutland Wildlife Trust as Management Support Officer, and I started in my role in March this year. And that's been the highlight of my year, really, being able to be a part of the Trust and get to know the team and work alongside such brilliant people. It's very exciting to see what's going to happen as things go forward into the future.
I'm Juliet, Assistant Reserve Officer. And my highlights of the year has been doing the grassland survey training. It was really great to learn all about how to survey your grasslands, and I really look forward to putting it into practice next year.
Hello, I'm Matt Skase. I'm the Administrative Assistant based at the Volunteer Training Centre in Rutland. I've now been here 6 months, and my highlight has just been getting to know everybody and seeing the amazing work that's going on within the Wildlife Trust. I do a lot with volunteers, and it's fascinating talking to them and hearing their stories, hearing all the things they've done, how long they've been volunteering. You know, they'll point out the trees they've planted, the hives they've built, they'll talk about birds they've grown. Really interesting to hear everything. And I love chatting to people and seeing how we can help them. So I look forward to carrying on and meeting as many people as possible.
So back to me again, finally. We don't have a specific agenda item for the date of the next meeting, next AGM. As hinted earlier, we hope to hold the AGM in a quite different format, to open it up to as many members as possible in the way they best want to participate. There'll be more detail in due course, but whatever the date, of course, it will be held within the statutory period. So now I'd like to declare at the end of this, the 67th AGM for Leicestershire and Rutland Wildlife Trust. And thank you all for attending. We now have a 5-minute comfort break, but whatever you do, do not log out. Professor Dave Wilson will be with you shortly. Right, welcome back, everybody. And tonight we welcome Professor Dave Goulson from the University of Sussex. He's the UK's foremost expert on insects. Many of you will already be familiar with Professor Goulson's work as an academic, but also through his advocacy work, including as an ambassador for the Wildlife Trusts, and his many publications aimed at demystifying insects and encouraging people to protect them. Books like A Buzz in the Meadow and A Sting in the Tail offer a fascinating insight to the complex insect world and really draw the reader in. He also has a marvellous YouTube channel, and I really encourage you to seek that out. But then in 2021, he published Silent Earth, Averting the Insect Apocalypse, a real clarion call for why insects matter and why we should absolutely do all we can to save. Remember, if you have any questions for Dave, there will be a Q&A box welcome. But Dave, over to you.
Thank you, Anne. Just bear with me a second while I hopefully share my screen. Nearly there. Oh, come on, there we go. Marvellous. Okay, thank you. Thanks very much for inviting me to talk to you this evening about insects. It's been great to listen to all the exciting stuff happening in Leicestershire and Rutland. I don't know how interested you all are in insects. I guess you must be somewhat interested, or else you wouldn't still be in this meeting. But I've been hooked on insects all my life. Since I was 5 or 6 years old, I started hunting around at lunchtime at primary school for caterpillars in the hedge and taking them home in my lunchbox and trying to rear them up. And usually they died, poor things, but occasionally I got them to survive and pupate, and some of them turned into moths and butterflies, and I just thought that was magic, and I've been hooked ever since. This isn't me, but this is my youngest son a couple of years ago. He's still in his insect phase, which I think many kids go through given half a chance. My son Seth, there he is with his pet cockchafer, Colin. Sadly, Colin's no longer with us, but Seth was very fond of him, and I think, given half a chance, most kids are fascinated by insects, and I find it really sad that people grow out of their childhood fascination, and often by the time they're teenagers and adults, most people, they don't like insects. They're frightened of insects. If anything buzzes near them, they flap at it, they try and kill it, which is really sad, and an attitude of sort of disconnect from nature that's, I think, is nicely captured in this sign. This was on the campus of the University of South Wales last summer, and it's in Welsh, as you probably worked out, but the bottom is the English translation. Warning, flying insects in this area. As if to say flying insects are something to be terrified of, run for your lives. There might be a bee or a butterfly. All it was some swarming winged ants, would you believe it, which somebody thought was sufficiently terrifying that they needed to put big warning signs up about. Anyway, I think insects are really cool, amazing creatures, incredibly diverse, make up about 70% of all known species on our planet. They've been around for about 480 million years, which makes them twice as old as the oldest dinosaurs. And that's why there are so many species they've had so long. We've named about 1.1 million different types of insects. There's something like 27,000 known from the UK alone. And what it's estimated, there's probably another 4 or 5 or 6 million that we haven't yet discovered. So we haven't yet found the majority of life on our own planet. Isn't that amazing? Anyway, sadly, and I don't want to dwell too long on this, there's pretty clear evidence that globally, on average, insects are in decline, fairly rapid decline in some cases. And I'm just going to give you a couple of examples. One is a fairly famous study from Germany. This is what you're looking at here, which was based on malaise trapping by German insect enthusiasts on nature reserves all across Germany. That funny tent top right is a Malaise trap. It catches all sorts of flying insects. Anything that flies into it ends up in a pot. And the graph there shows you the biomass of insects caught per trap per day from 1989 to 2016, so a 27-year period. And you can see it fell, but on average it fell by 76%. So essentially 3/4 of the flying insects seem to have disappeared from German nature reserves in a 27-year period, which is pretty terrifying. And sadly, it doesn't seem to be something confined to German nature reserves. As far as we can tell, this is more widespread. I'll give you one other example from closer to home. This is one of my I'm a specialist in bumblebees. Spent the last 30 years studying bumblebees. Lovely creatures. I could bore you to tears by talking about them, but I'll spare you. Anyway, this is the shrill carder, which, as you can see, pre-1960 was quite widespread in England and Wales, particularly in the south, but it was found in Leicestershire. Anyway, as time went on, this species has declined, along with many others, until the millennium, when it was down to about 6 surviving populations. And that was when I became interested in what was driving bumblebee declines. And I went looking for this bee. At the time, I was at Southampton University, and so the nearest population I could locate was on Salisbury Plain. And so I spent a summer hunting around for shrill carders on Salisbury Plain, which was tremendous fun, a beautiful place, amazing wildflowers and so on. I did find a few, not very many at all. I did get very excited when I finally caught one. But since 2000, the Salisbury Plain population has gone extinct. And very recently, the Somerset Levels population seems to be just about gone. So within my lifetime, this bee has almost gone extinct in Britain, within the lifetimes of, I'm guessing, most people here. And this is not something that's happened in the past and that's stopped. It's ongoing. This bee is still declining right now, despite the efforts of various conservation organizations to try to look after them. So yeah, cause for concern. And yet most people have never really noticed declining insect populations because most people pay no attention to insects whatsoever. As I said earlier, they don't really like them. They'd rather avoid them. The only thing that I think most people over a certain age have noticed, of course, is this. And you don't need me to explain, I'm sure, but I do remember when I was a kid cleaning the car windscreen on summer holidays when we had a long drive, because it just became opaque with bug guts splattered all over it, poor things. But it stopped. Exactly when it stopped, I guess it wasn't sudden. It declined, and the cartoonist who produced these pictures decided to extrapolate into the future the consequences of insect decline potentially, which although it's a cartoon, it makes an important point, because of course we depend upon insects. They are really important. They perform all sorts of functions in ecosystems that we can't do without, such as, of course, their food. They're the main food source for an enormous number of vertebrate species, many birds, almost all bats, lots of freshwater fish, amphibians, lizards, and other reptiles. They all depend upon insect prey. So if the insects go, then they'll go. But insects aren't just important as food. They do lots of other stuff. They're, of course, important biocontrol agents, things like the ladybird there and the hoverfly. And the earwigs are actually quite important. And the lacewing, that funny thing at the bottom. You're probably all madly working out what's what here. Dung beetles are really important at disposing of dung, along with dung flies and other feeders on dung. Carrion beetles help to dispose of dead bodies. Ants help to keep the soil aerated, and they distribute seeds, and so on and so on. There's umpteen other things that insects do that I haven't got time to go into. And most of this happens without anyone noticing, paying attention, giving any credit to insects. The one thing that I think most people now appreciate that insects do for us, of course, is this pollination, which many people mistakenly think is only done by bees, and some people think is only done by honeybees. It's actually done by thousands of different species of insect. Bees are pretty good at it, but lots of other insects get in on the act too, things like butterflies and moths, and lots of species of fly and wasp and beetle and so on. And between them, globally, they pollinate 80% of plant species. So most plants on the planet would eventually disappear if they weren't being pollinated by insects. And of course, we directly depend upon insects for insect pollinators. Roughly 3/4 of the crops we grow in the world need pollinating by insects. Most fruits and vegetables, everything including apples, cherries, strawberries, raspberries, blueberries, squashes, pumpkins, tomatoes, could go on and on and on. Even things like coffee and chocolate require insect pollinators. So, you know, the nasty truth is we couldn't feed the global human population without insect pollinators. So we really have a very selfish, direct, vested interest in ensuring the continuation of these little critters. Or else we'll end up visiting the supermarket and it won't look so rosy. And we need to avoid ending up like these people. These photos you might have seen before. They've been quite widely distributed, but they show farmers in southwest China. There's a big area of apple and pear orchards where there's now so few wild pollinators left that they have to resort to hand pollinating the flowers, and they get their kids to climb up with little paintbrushes and pots of pollen to individually pollinate each flower by hand, which and the pictures look quite sweet, don't they? But it's kind of terrifying, you know, and it wouldn't be practical for most crops in the developed world. Imagine a Leicestershire farmer hand pollinating a field of oilseed rape. I can't really see it. So we do need to look after bees for selfish reasons, not just bees, insects, and because of all these things they do. And I've trotted this argument out many times, and it's absolutely true, but it slightly worries me as arguments go, because there's kind of two reasons. One is that it doesn't really capture why I care about insects. I just think they're cool and fascinating and amazing, and that it would be a shame if they weren't here. Regardless of, obviously, I also appreciate having fruits and vegetables to eat. But the other thing is, the other sort of flaw in this kind of selfish, what do they do for us argument for looking after them, is that there are probably loads of insects that don't do anything that we actually benefit from. But I would argue they still deserve to live. They still deserve a space on our planet just as much as we do. So just to give you a perhaps slightly silly example, this is the St. Helena giant earwig. It's the biggest earwig that ever lived. It's about 3.5 inches long, or it was. It lived on the island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic, in seabird colonies scavenging. Amazing creature, but sadly it's extinct. We think it hasn't been seen alive since the 1960s. So it's almost certainly gone now. And it didn't do anything that we couldn't do without. There were no repercussions from the disappearance, the extinction of this earwig. But it seems to me the world is a sadder place for not having that earwig. And I would argue that earwig had a right to life, regardless of whether it benefited mankind or not. I would say all the creatures that we share our planet with have a right to life. So we should look after them better. Just because we can drive them extinct doesn't mean we have a moral, that morally that's the right thing to do. So if we're going to look after them better, what should we do? On to some more positive things. So I'm going to try and quickly skim through 3 areas this evening in the time I've got left to me. I'm going to talk a bit about farming, very briefly. I'm going to talk about rewilding, not everyone's cup of tea. And then I'll talk more about what we can do in urban areas, in our gardens and so on. So first, farming. It's important to think about farming because it is the biggest land use. In the UK, 70% roughly of the land is farmed. And if we don't get that right, if we don't find a way to farm, to grow food that is compatible with also supporting life, wildlife, then it's going to be pretty hard to conserve wildlife, I would say. And unfortunately, we have gone down a route of farming which I don't think is sustainable. Not everyone would agree with me. This is a big and complicated subject, and it probably deserves not just 5 minutes from me, but several hours of discussion from a whole bunch of people with different views. But my take is that we've gone down this sort of industrialized farming route with ever more chemical inputs, with bigger and bigger fields, with fewer and fewer crops grown, vast monocultures, simple rotations. It's ecologically not sustainable because, and this isn't just my feeling, there are some things that we can't continue doing, at least 3 of which are captured in the photos on this screen. So starting bottom right, we've basically, farming has replaced relatively biodiverse ecosystems with ecosystems with almost no biodiversity. And yet it needs biodiversity, it needs biocontrol agents to help control pests. It needs the pollinators to pollinate crops. So it's undermining its own foundations. And it's also undermining its foundations in a second sense, which is that modern farming techniques have done a lot of damage to the world's soils. The United Nations published a report not long ago that estimated that 40% of the world's soils are badly degraded. The obvious question is, what do we think our children and our grandchildren are going to be growing their crops in if we don't leave them soil? It takes tens of thousands of years to replace. And of course, the soil degradation results in a lot of carbon that was captured in the soil going into the atmosphere, which contributes to climate change. And farming generally, and food production and food processing, contributes about 30% of greenhouse gas emissions, which explains what the polar bears there are doing. They're just there to remind me to mention climate change. Food production is driving climate change, and again, undermining its own foundations because the increasing temperatures, increased frequency of droughts, fires, floods, and so on, all damage crop production. So I'd say we can't carry on doing what we've been doing, and we need to find a sustainable way to feed everybody. So what might a sustainable farming system look like? I think it helps to just kind of step back a bit and say, okay, what would we ideally want from farming? Clearly, we want a system that looks after the soil properly. I personally think the only sustainable way to manage pests and so on is to work with nature, encourage biocontrol agents rather than endlessly spraying more and more pesticides, which is what we've done to date. So we need to find a way to use far fewer pesticides. I think a key thing we need to think about is increasing crop diversity. We grow very few crops in the world. Most of human food comes from a handful of crops, rice, maize, wheat, and so on, which is actually not very good for us, for our diet, for our health. We should be eating more fruits and vegetables, but we don't grow them, which is kind of daft. Anyway, the good news is that actually there's a huge amount going on in the world of regenerative farming these days. It's quite exciting. I went to the Groundswell conference in Hertfordshire in the summer, which is all about regenerative farming, and thousands of farmers were there, along with all sorts of other interested folk, giving talks about how to look after the soil, about using cover crops to keep the soil together, about using flower strips to encourage butterflies and bumblebees and so on, about things like agroforestry, which is dividing fields up with rows of trees that might produce fruit or timber or nuts or fodder for livestock and so on. So there's all sorts of really exciting stuff going on right now in the world of farming. There's definitely reason to be optimistic for the future on that one. And that's all I'm going to say about farming. It really is a huge and complicated subject, but an important one. Onwards to rewilding, which I really like, but I must admit I've met quite a few people that don't like it at all. Particularly some farmers see it as a threat to their existence, which they shouldn't. I really don't think they should at all, and I'll try and explain why. But it's a bit of a slippery term. People mean different things by it. So I'll try and explain what I think it is and why I think it has a place. I first heard about it in the context of Yellowstone National Park, which is a really interesting place. I can't tell you the full story because it would take too long, but basically it was overpopulated with deer because there were no large predators left. The wolves in particular had been hunted out many decades earlier. And the deer population were causing the trees couldn't regenerate, the soil was bare and blowing away because it was being overgrazed. And so they took the decision to introduce wolves, and it profoundly benefited the ecosystem. The deer population was a bit reduced, but more importantly, they changed their behavior. They started keeping away from steep-sided river valleys where the wolves could easily catch them, which meant trees started to grow back in the valleys, which provided more food for beavers, which produced more dams, which provided more wetland for birds and amphibians and so on. And so there was a whole cascade of benefits from just restoring a missing species. Rewilding in Europe has taken a slightly different turn. There it's tended to focus more on replacing missing large herbivores, which we think probably play an important role in supporting biodiversity, or did before people came along and got rid of most of them. Things like the auroch and the wild horses that used to roam around Europe, and so on and so on. The project I'm most familiar with, the rewilding project, is Knepp in West Sussex, which is a bit of a way from Leicestershire, but I could heartily recommend a trip to see it if you're interested. So Knepp is a 3,500 acre estate on very heavy clay soil, the same soil that my garden is on, in fact. And I can speak from experience in saying that it's quite hard to grow crops on, but the Knepp estate was heavily farmed until 23 years ago or thereabouts. They farmed the hell out of it to try and make a profit, but even with all the subsidies they claimed and everything they could do, it wasn't very productive land, and they were making a loss, and they were very slowly going bankrupt. And so they decided to do something different, to embrace the rewilding, to turn their estate over to nature, to introduce missing large herbivores that, like the longhorn cows there, which take the place of the auroch, the giant cow that was the ancestor of our domestic cattle. And they released Tamworth pigs as a surrogate for wild boars, and Exmoor ponies to replace the tarpan that used to roam around Britain thousands of years ago. And some deer, and also some, more recently and very excitingly, beavers and white storks, which are thriving. The beavers had their first kits this summer, just gone. And it's been really interesting to see what happens if you then just step back. You put these creatures in. They would have loved to have added wolves and lynx and the like as well, but you can imagine the opposition that would have entailed. Anyway, it's been, I would say, a great success. Certainly from an insect point of view, there's loads of insects there in the summer. For example, purple emperor butterflies, top left, they're gorgeous things. There were none at Knepp 23 years ago. Now they have the biggest population in Britain. It's where if you saw the Wild Isles Attenborough series, they filmed a long sequence with purple emperors at Knepp. This last summer, they had the large tortoiseshell appear, which is supposed to be extinct in Britain. There are slight suspicions about how it suddenly magically appeared. But anyway, that was exciting. And what's really telling, I think, is that populations of insect-eating birds are increasing at NEP. Things like nightingales, they have a thriving and increasing population of nightingales, having had, again, no nightingales there 23 years ago. Cuckoos you hear in the spring singing, making their classic call. We hardly hear them in lowland England anymore, but at NEP you still hear them. So I would argue that on less productive land, on land that isn't profitable without lots of subsidies to support farming, that maybe it makes more sense to encourage farmers, or at least offer farmers the option of going down this route. Obviously, we need to grow food. The most productive land should be used for growing food. But on the less productive land, maybe that land is better used for supporting biodiversity, for carbon capture, and for recreation. Thousands of people visit NEP every weekend in the summer. It's really great to see people, going there and getting excited by seeing purple emperor butterflies and hearing the nightingales and so on. I think it's a great way to reconnect people with nature. So I would love to see more rewilding projects dotted around Britain, basically. Anyway, I haven't got time to say any more about that. On to my third and final topic of things we can do to encourage insects. Is what we can do in our gardens, which is obviously for most of us don't have a 3,500 acre estate, sadly, but many of us do have a garden, and I think it's a great place to encourage people to do simple things for nature that really work, but not just because it benefits nature, but also because it provides amazing opportunities to engage, to encourage our children to grow up in an environment where they see butterflies and bumblebees and so on. I have this kind of maybe wildly optimistic, crazy dream where every garden in Britain, and there are about 22 million gardens in Britain, covering about 400,000 hectares of land. Just imagine if we could get most of them wildlife friendly, get planted with native wildflowers and bee-friendly flowers, and with a pond and a compost heap. And I'll talk about some of these things in a bit more detail in a second. And if we could get the councils on board so that the local parks were full of flowers, and the cemeteries and the roundabouts and the road verges and so on, then that would be a national network of wildlife-friendly habitat, and that would really make a difference, I would say. I've written books about this. Sorry for plugging some of my books, but there you go, should you be interested. Or you can check me out on YouTube, where I give lots of wildlife gardening advice. While I'm plugging things, I'd also wanted to flag up the Buzz Club if you're at all interested in getting involved in citizen science. The Buzz Club is trying to work out what is the best design, or which garden interventions for wildlife work best. Things like bee hotels. What's the best design of bee hotel? One of our staff invented the hoverfly lagoon, which is a breeding habitat for rat-tailed maggots, which are fantastic creatures, and we've come up with a design of earwig hotel and various other things, and you can help us test them and see whether they work in your own garden if you're interested. Just Google Buzz Club. The first thing that usually comes up is a tattoo parlor in Bristol, but usually the second thing is the what you're after, unless you need a tattoo. Anyway, so there's a lot of interest in wildlife gardening, which is great. But also there seems to be a kind of counter movement in Britain these days. There are many people who are adopting a kind of a scorched earth approach to gardening. They don't want insects in their garden. They don't want wildlife at all. There was this recent survey, I think it was this year or last year, which estimated that 8% of British gardens now have plastic grass. This is plastic grass, in case you hadn't realized. How horrific is that? I could rant at length about why we shouldn't have plastic grass, but I'm hoping you don't need any convincing. I even saw recently, I took this photo, it's actually on Guernsey. That is a plastic hedge, believe it or not, in the foreground there. A plastic hedge with a plastic lawn. What is the world coming to? Anyway, I'm sure none of you would do such awful things, but many of us, including myself, I have to say, are guilty of slightly less obvious gardening misdemeanors that we should at least think about. You know, many of us love to go to a garden centre, and you see lots of people at the weekend, particularly in the spring and summer, with a big trolley, and they pile it with annual bedding plants grown in disposable plastic pots, probably grown in a peat-based compost, probably treated with pesticides, and certainly treated with fertilizers. And then they might get a bag of peat-based compost to put in the bottom of the trolley, and they might get some Roundup to kill the weeds on the drive, and some bug clear to kill the aphids on the roses. And you can see what I'm saying. There's an awful lot of stuff on sale in your local garden centre, which is not good for the environment. So do think about your choices. On the other hand, gardens really can be amazing places for wildlife. And actually, the world-leading example of this is from Leicester. You may be familiar with Jenny Owen, who is a lady who lives, I think still lives in quite near the centre of Leicester. She wrote this book, The Wildlife of a Garden, in which describes how she basically spent 35 years. She's only got a small garden, it's about 1/8 of an acre, and she spent 35 years cataloguing every species of creature, insects, plants, birds, fungi, whatever, that she could find in her garden. And her species list, after, I mean, phenomenal effort, 35 years, her species list was 2,673 different species of animal and plant, most of them insects, of course. But isn't that amazing? I mean, I would have thought that, you know, that's what you might find in 1/8 of an acre of rainforest or something, not in a garden in the middle of Leicester. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like Leicester, but it's not famed for its biodiversity, really. Anyway, so gardens can have thousands of species in them with just some simple steps in the right direction. What are those steps? Well, I haven't got time left to talk about them in detail, but let's run through some quick things. Firstly, plant native plants whenever you can. And if you can't find a native plant for the job, think about near natives, plants from not far away in Europe, for example. And the reason for this is, well, firstly, there's lots of evidence, including the open access paper down the bottom, should you be interested. There's lots of evidence that native plants, on average, are a little bit better at attracting pollinators than non-natives. Things like, so here's 3 examples of some native wildflowers you might grow in your garden. On the left, there's one of my favorites, Viper's bugloss or bugloss. Bees go mad for it. And then top right is marjoram, which really, these are all really easy to grow plants, and marjoram is loved by insects of all types, and you can use it in your cooking as well. And then bottom right is greater knapweed. But those are just 3 examples of amazing plants for native plants that look beautiful in your garden, that are easy to grow, and everyone should have some, and a whole bunch of others if you can squeeze them in. So they're better for pollinators, but actually the real advantage of native plants is that they're better for herbivores. And there's an important point here. Herbivorous insects are much fussier about what they eat than pollinators. Bumblebees will visit hundreds of different species of plant, for example, to get nectar and pollen. But caterpillars of butterflies and moths, for example, tend to eat just one species of plant, or perhaps 2 or 3 closely related species. They're really, really fussy, for reasons I haven't got time to go into. So every native plant species you grow in your garden will support usually 1 or 2 or sometimes dozens of species of herbivorous insects. A classic simple example I've put up here, the orange-tip butterfly, gorgeous butterfly. Everybody loves an orange tip. Lays its eggs on a small number of cabbage family plants, including lady's smock there, which is a beautiful plant to grow in your garden. So grow some lady's smock. Looks lovely, and in the spring, with a bit of luck, you'll get a female orange-tip butterfly flying by and laying some eggs on it, and you can watch the caterpillars grow, and you can have your own little breeding population of orange tips. If you don't grow the plant, then you can guarantee orange tips will not breed in your garden because they're really fussy. And likewise, take it to an extreme. If you've got room to plant a tree, then plant yourself. Well, if you were to choose a gum tree and a eucalyptus, and there are loads in your local garden centre, I'm sure, then nothing at all will benefit from it. Nothing can eat the leaves, unless you've got a pet koala. Whereas if you plant an oak tree or any number of the other native trees, and it will support hundreds of species of insect, and they will then in turn support birds that eat them, and so on. A whole ecosystem will develop over time. So plant native where you can is the take-home message, which brings me to my next topic, which is weeds. We're taught as gardeners, if we're taught anything, that there are some plants that are not appropriate in the garden. They're undesirables. They're to be rooted out and poisoned or dug up and got rid of. Things like dandelions and ragwort and any species of thistle. But actually, these are native wildflowers, and I've been involved in some research which shows that they are among the most attractive plants to pollinators in Britain. So we really ought to learn to value them more and try to be tolerant. I have all of these things growing in my garden. It's not the tidiest garden in the world, but the insects like it. You can get rid of all the weeds in your garden, just like that, by just calling them wildflowers, because that's basically what they are. So chill out about the weeds, and also try to chill out about mowing. Many people try to emulate a kind of stripy Wimbledon tennis court in their garden. You don't need to. It's futile. What a waste of petrol and sweat. Instead of getting the mower out, get a deck chair out, make yourself a gin and tonic, let the lawn grow a bit. This is my lawn, and I haven't sown any wildflower seed in it or anything. It's just, there were lots of clovers and vetches and trefoils, buttercups and so on, just waiting for a chance to flower. And they did as soon as I stopped mowing. And so many of us are sitting on a ready-made wildflower meadow if we just don't mow so often. And likewise, there's an awful lot of amenity grasslands mown yes. This is a lovely example from Stirling up in Scotland, where the verge has been planted with wildflowers instead. Just imagine if every road verge in Britain looked like that, if every roundabout looked like that, wouldn't that be brilliant? We did a little bit of research and found that there were 50 times as many bees and I think 13 times as many hoverflies following this change in management of the road verge. Instead, sadly, what you often see when you travel around urban areas in Britain is this kind of nonsense. Instead of encouraging nature on a little bit of soil on a pavement at the side of the road, someone's come along and sprayed it with herbicide. And in fact, many councils employ teams of people to drive the streets in the spring and summer looking for anything green in urban areas. And if they see anything, they'll jump out and spray it with herbicide, which just seems like needless environmental vandalism to me. It just seems bonkers. I don't understand it. Aside from the harm to wildlife, the chemical being used is almost always based on glyphosate, and there's pretty good evidence, disputed by the manufacturers, but pretty strong evidence that it causes cancer in people. And yet we spray it in parks, we spray it around children's play equipment. It seems pretty bonkers to me. Personally, I would ban urban pesticide use. I would ban the garden use of all pesticides. And if you think that sounds a bit extreme, then there are plenty of examples of places that have done it, literally hundreds of towns and cities around the world, including in 2018, France introduced a blanket ban on urban pesticides. Only licensed farmers can buy pesticides now in France, so the local council can't buy them if they wanted to. And so Paris is pesticide free, and it hasn't been overrun by giant dandelions or cockroaches or whatever. If Paris can be pesticide free, why can't Leicester, why can't London? It seems like a no-brainer, a really easy win to me. Now, I'm guessing many of you don't spray pesticides in your garden, but do beware. A couple of final things to watch out for. The beautiful plants, we're back at the garden centre now, the beautiful plants on sale in your local garden centre will have almost certainly been kept beautiful by spraying them with lots of pesticides. And again, we published some research on this a few years ago now, where we screened all the plants we specifically screened ones being sold as bee friendly or perfect for pollinators. And nearly 100% of them contained pesticides. Most of them contained insecticides, which is pretty awful, really, when you stop to think about it. Then finally, do watch out. If you've got a dog or a cat, your vet may well encourage you to treat it for fleas. They'll often encourage you to treat them prophylactically. Just beware that these are really potent insecticides that you're introducing to your household. They're quite persistent. They're really toxic to insects. They're neurotoxins. The one on the left is based on imidacloprid, which is a type of neonicotinoid insecticide. The dose you're supposed to put on a medium-sized dog each month, dripping on its neck, it's enough to kill 60 million honeybees. And really disturbingly, we recently found that, oh, there we go. It's, again, open access, should you be interested. 100% of English rivers that were tested contained fipronil, one of those two products, almost certainly coming from dogs and cats. And 70% of them also contained imidacloprid. So these are two neurotoxic insecticides, both of them swilling around in almost every river in Britain, in England, sorry. And the concentrations were usually above those which are deemed to be safe for wildlife, which is yet more crap in our rivers, I'm afraid. And that's a big topic these days, isn't it? Anyway, so I need to wrap up because I'm pretty much out of time. I think we basically need to try and stop trying to kill things and reconnect with nature and realize that we're part of nature. You know, Rachel Carson, you might be familiar with, she once said that you know, mankind's war against nature is inevitably a war against itself. And it is, because we are part of nature and we need to learn to respect and love it. And remember that, you know, it's bizarre, but we live on a rock hurtling through space with a little crust of life clinging to its surface. It's completely unique. There's nothing else like it in the universe. And we should look after it because it is everything to us. And we've been pretty reckless with it so far. And it really worries me that, you know, we would all do anything for our children, wouldn't we? Apart from apparently leave them a decent planet to live on. So let's try and do better. And what better place to start than by looking after all these little creatures that live all around us, the insects. Thank you very much, everybody, if you're still there, for bearing with me. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Dave, thank you so much. That was inspirational, slightly depressing, but you saved it for me when you talked about stop mowing and sit in the garden with a gin and tonic. That was the answer.
Or red wine.
Yeah, or red wine, absolutely. I'd love people to write in any questions you have. Please put in the Q&A, and I will do it whilst you're all typing furiously. Yeah, Dave, I was really interested. I think Silent Spring was the first environmental book I read, I think, and it was published, I think, back in the 1960s, and it was kind of a warning shot across the bows to everybody about what we were doing to insects. Is, you know, 50, 60 years later, we still seem to be firing warning shots. Are you optimistic that we can actually sort of do something about this, or are we never going to be able to change attitudes around it?
Things are changing. I mean, yeah, Silent Spring was 1962, so we're now 61 years on, and I do think poor old Rachel would roll in her grave if she knew what's happening. Because the interesting thing is, you know, she kind of won a battle. You know, initially she was slated, she was subject to all sorts of kind of personal attacks, but eventually people realized that what she said was true, that the chemicals that were being used, things like DDT and the organophosphates and so on, were really awful, and they were poisoning wildlife and people and everything else. And they were eventually banned. And I think everyone thought the problem had been solved, but actually dozens and dozens, in fact, thousands of new products have been invented since then. And, you know, where she was, when she published Silent Spring, there were 37 pesticides available in the United States, whereas now there's a little over 1,000. So yeah, in that sense, things are pretty terrifying. But the direction of travel is definitely changing. And, you know, we've seen the ELM scheme in the UK, which hasn't really been, it's been botched to some extent, but it's well intended. And it seems to be trying to encourage more sustainable farming. And in Europe, they've got this farm to fork strategy, which is trying to halve pesticide use and encourage organic farming and so on. So the good things are happening. And I mentioned the Groundswell conference and so on. There is a realization amongst many people that, you know, we've got to do things differently, or else we face a pretty bleak future. Whether we're doing it fast enough is key, but, you know, we've all got to do our best, haven't we?
Yeah, no, great, thanks. It's it's frightening how long it's been going on for, isn't it? With lots of people like yourselves keep giving those messages out. We've got some good questions in. I'd love to share with you. So we had one from Hillary. Thanks for that. Every year we get wasp nest in our house somewhere. Do we call out pest control, or should we just leave them?
You know what I'm going to say to that. Yeah, I mean, if you possibly can, please leave them. Wasps are really important. They help to control if you grow vegetables, they'll help to control caterpillars and aphids. They're pollinators. Most people don't appreciate that, but wasps are pretty good pollinators. And yeah, you know, they're native organisms. They deserve a place. As long as, I mean, if they try and nest in your living room, you might have issues. But I've had them nesting on my house most years. And in my garden shed right next to the lawnmower, which thankfully I don't need to get out very often. But if you just ignore them, I mean, they don't come and pick a fight. And yeah, you know, please don't get the pest company in to spray them unless you really, really, really have to.
Great. One from Annie, and I wasn't aware of this, so quite interesting here. How much better single portal flowers are for insects than multi-petaled? I've avoided them for some years now.
Yeah, as you say, many people don't know this, but a lot of mutant double variety flowers are on sale in garden centres, which are basically mutants where the anthers, the pollen producing organs of the flower, have mutated into extra petals. So you get double varieties of aquiledias and hollyhocks, and well, roses are a classic. You know, you think of a wild dog rose, which just has, I think, 5 petals, and insects can get into the middle of it where the pollen and nectar is. Whereas the sort of classic, you know, fancy rose, a hybrid tea or whatever, it's just a bundle of petals, and nothing can get into it. They're absolutely useless for wildlife. So yeah, a really simple thing is, you know, when you're choosing plants for the garden, go for the simpler single flowers.
Great. We're getting plenty of questions in now. You might need more wine. Tim and Marie, thank you for this. And this went through my mind when you were talking about this. How do we maintain a mowing regime that gives wildlife, especially caterpillars, the best chance of surviving? Is it a case of absolutely minimizing mowing, or?
Yeah, it's tricky because you probably want to maintain some areas that aren't knee deep in long grass if you want to, you know, play with the kids or whatever. I mean, in my garden, I'm lucky I've got quite a lot of space. So I kind of rotate the cutting. I have some bits right next to the house that I cut often enough that it doesn't, you know, it's not super long. But most of it I cut a couple of times a year, but I cut different bits. I stagger it so that it's not all cut at once. You do have to cut at some point, and this is an important issue. If you don't cut at all, you will end up with a jungle, which is, you know, not a bad thing, but probably not what most people want. And it will eventually regenerate into a forest if you wait long enough. You know, the beautiful hay meadows and chalk downlands that we value so much were either cut or grazed, and that management is a vital part of the annual cycle. but typically a hay meadow would be cut once or at most twice a year, maybe grazed a bit in the autumn. So yeah, I mean, just basically cut as little as you can and try to stagger it, and so there's always somewhere with some long grass for the wildlife.
Yeah, that's great, and that's a great excuse, isn't it? You can go halfway through mowing your lawns from now on and say that's enough for me. I'm always trying that. This other half is for nature. There's a question from Phil, which is really interesting and something I was considering when you were saying it, and he's asking about should we be putting dog-proof fences around ponds on our nature reserves. I mean, I've walked many of our nature reserves now, and I probably meet more dog walkers than anybody else on our nature reserves. You know, should we be trying to restrict dogs from, I mean, apart from the disturbance, but getting into those ponds just because of the impact?
Yeah, I mean, it's sad. I've got a dog, and I don't treat it with that stuff, but I empathize with, you know, because some dogs love to swim. Please, if you're going to let your dog swim in any freshwater habitat, don't treat it with those flea treatments. So yeah, I hope I'm not betraying top secret information here, but I am aware of a study that's been done recently on Hampstead Heath, where there are designated dog ponds and designated fenced off no dog ponds, and they tested them for these pesticides and you know, found exactly what you'd expect, that the ones with dogs swimming in them were chock full of insecticide and the ones without were nice and clean. So, you know, when there's so many species living in aquatic ecosystems that we should be worried about, then, you know, clearly it makes it's madness to let insecticide coated dogs jump in them.
No, that's really helpful, and that's something we'll take away, because I think on our nature reserves there's lots of water areas, and this could be, you know, we're trying to develop those for insects, many cases, as well as the birds, which are often coming to feed on them. So looking towards, you know, what measures we can take to really protect that is really important. Somebody asked about Paris. We were lucky enough in Wildlife Trust to have one of the leads around Paris come in and talk around their pesticide-free status, but also the monitoring they've done, which is incredible. I came back thinking, could we do this for Leicester? Yeah, the question was, you know, what was the main driving force for this initiative? And I think anything else you've got around how successful that's been as well.
I don't know the history of, you know, what the French politics behind it. I do know that the French are more suspicious of pesticides generally than I think we have a more gung-ho attitude generally. They've always tried to use fewer than we do. But if you're interested in trying to encourage, you know, your local town, city, Leicester or wherever to go pesticide free, talk to PAN UK. PAN stands for Pesticide Action Network. They're actually based in Brighton, not so far from me, but it's an international organization, and they have a specific campaign where they're on urban pesticide use, where they provide advice on how to cope without them. You know, what to do about weeds being the probably the hardest problem, because there is the risk of you get complaints that you know, there are dandelions sprouting up through the cracks in the pavement, and people say that it trips them up. And I'm not overly sympathetic. I sometimes think it's a bit ridiculous, but there are issues, but they can give advice on what the options are, the non-pesticide ways to control weeds and so on. So PAN UK is where I direct you, basically.
And I know there's some really good publications around about Paris as well. So just a couple more questions, Dave, if that's okay. I just wanted to give you some feedback. Susan's put something in here which just says, that was one of the most inspiring talks I've ever heard. It will literally change my life from tomorrow morning onwards. Thanks, Susan. Brilliant. And thank you, Dave. That's the impact. So absolutely fantastic. Richard sent in a question asking, it's well documented about the decline of insect species we're witnessing in the UK. Do you think we could see other species moving in from mainland Europe to replace them as the climate warms up? I mean, we've certainly, even locally in Leicester, started to see changes in populations of things like butterflies. Is that happening on a bigger scale? And do you think that's
yeah? We will undoubtedly get some new arrivals from warmer climes as it warms up here, but it will tend to be the kind of more common roughy tufty mobile species that were doing okay, and not the habitat specialists, the rare species, the ones that are more likely to go extinct. And it's interesting because you'd think insects would like warm weather, and getting warmer would be a good thing. And if everything else were equal, perhaps it would be. But if you're, for example, a butterfly living in a specialist habitat, say heathland, and you've got to island hop to northwards to try and keep track with climate change, well, it's really difficult because you've got to cross inhospitable habitat in between. So lots of creatures can't move and will just suffer from climate change, find themselves living in the wrong place. There was a study published on UK butterflies specifically trying to estimate the net effect of climate change, and it concluded that for about 70-something% of species it would be negative, but for a few things like large whites and so on, it would probably be positive.
Brilliant. No, thank you. That's really good. We've seen variations in butterflies simply moving up to slightly higher altitudes just as a result of climate change. Well, that's what we suspect it's being caused by. So if I can just ask you one there's lots of people just saying wonderful talk and thanking you for it. But there's one simple question to end on. What is the best way to convince politicians of the harms of the neonicotinoids? So I can never pronounce that.
Well, I don't want to end on a negative, but as I've spent the last 15 years trying to convince politicians and failing miserably, then I really am not the person to ask. I more generally, not perhaps answering specifically on neonics, but what I would love to do would be able to, if you could get these bloody politicians that don't seem to care at all about the environment, take Rishi, to hold him by the hand and take him into a meadow full of flowers and insects and bird song and stuff, just for a few minutes, and make him sit down and actually look at all this amazing stuff. I'd love to be able to do that. I'd love to be able to get Bill Gates and Elon Musk and all of them and take them and just make them pay attention, because I bet they'd be fascinated if you could just stop them making money for a few minutes and get them to look, But how you do that, I've absolutely no idea. But wouldn't it be nice?
We have every intention. As soon as the election goes and we get new politicians, that's what we're going to try to be doing in the trust, is exactly that, to take them to some of these amazing places and just get them to think about it for a moment. We've got one question there about how to encourage local councils, which is probably unfair. I would say the local councils, I did go to a talk in Leicester City Council, and they were talking about their bee roads, which are, as you sound, much like the pictures you showed of not treating the verges, to encourage bee populations in there, which I thought was absolutely fantastic. Thank you, everybody, for typing their questions in. If there's anything else, send them in and we will try to get some answers if there's anything afterwards. But as I say, Dave, lots of people are just saying, fantastic talk, thank you so much. I think it's really resonated with people listening, so much appreciate that, and thank you for your time. I thought it was great.
It was a pleasure. Thanks to everybody for tuning in.
Don't go yet, Dave. I just wanted to say thank you from all of us for that wonderful talk. As Matt's just been saying, there's so many people who are popping up saying this was just absolutely wonderful. Thank you for such an inspiring talk. You've planted so many great ideas tonight. I think you've planted a lot of great ideas in our own minds here, actually, amongst trustee council and staff, about things we could be doing as well. And I really like the idea of trying to encourage our larger urban areas to go pesticide free. I think that would be a great start. I'm a bit envious tonight with you with the red wine, because I've got to drive home now, so I couldn't. But
sorry about that.
I'm glad to see you imbibing. Right, we're going to conclude the evening now, because I think, it's late enough and we've had a wonderful time. We've had a fantastic talk from Dave, and thank you to everybody for the great questions. I think, Joe, did you want to give a final number of the attendees?
Yeah, we peaked at 146.
Right, that's absolutely fantastic. So we're very short order. We're going to be circulating by email a survey about people's views of the AGM. It would be really grateful if you could fill that in for us and help us improve AGMs in future. And so now I'm going to say, once again, thank you to Dave for such a great evening talk tonight. And I want to say good night to everyone. And as it's just around the corner, I'm going to wish everyone a good Christmas, a happy new year when it arrives. Good night to everybody.